They told us air combat was about the fastest jets, the deadliest missiles, and the most advanced radar money could buy. For decades, that was the story. If you had the tech, you ruled the skies. But now, somewhere between the mountains of Asia and the open blue over the Pacific, a different story is being written. It's a story of fighter pilots who break every rule in the book, drones that dance with manned jets like they share the same heartbeat, and strategies that turn billion-dollar warplanes into vulnerable targets. The West is watching closely, not because it wants to, but because it has to. Air dominance is no longer a birthright of superior machines. It's a contest of adaptability, deception, endurance, and the kind of creative chaos that rewrites the very rules of war. Western air combat philosophy has for decades rested on a foundational belief. If you have the most advanced aircraft, the most sophisticated radar, and the best weapons, you will inevitably control the skies. That belief was built on the success stories of past conflicts, where technologically superior forces overwhelmed opponents before they could even mount a meaningful defense. But recent studies of Asian jet tactics have begun to erode that assumption. Military analysts in top Western defense circles have been confronted with a growing reality that technology, while critical, is not the only decisive factor in air superiority. What's emerging from these studies is a recognition that adaptability in tactics, real-time decision-making, and operational creativity can sometimes offset or even surpass raw technological advantage. In several instances, highly advanced Western aircraft have been simulated or theoretically outmaneuvered by jets that, on paper, should have been outclassed. The difference lay in how these aircraft were flown, the training philosophy of the pilots, and the ability to adjust mid-combat to changing conditions. Asian air forces have been observed practicing maneuvers that are unconventional in Western doctrine, deliberately breaking formation, altering altitude and speed in unpredictable patterns, and exploiting terrain in ways that sophisticated targeting systems struggle to track. They are less bound by rigid engagement protocols, allowing pilots to improvise under pressure without waiting for central command clearance, which in a fast-moving aerial engagement can be the difference between a hit and a narrow escape. This adaptability also extends to mission planning, whereas Western doctrines often emphasize optimal engagement scenarios based on predictive modeling. Some Asian strategies embrace chaos as a weapon, deliberately creating unexpected conditions where an opponent's carefully planned advantage begins to unravel. Training exercises have revealed that in situations where Western pilots relied heavily on their aircraft's advanced sensors and systems, opponents employing adaptive tactics were able to force engagements into visual range, where the technological edge was diminished and human skill played a greater role. This adaptability is not just a matter of flying skill, it is deeply embedded in the organizational culture of these air forces. Pilots are taught to expect the unexpected, to prepare for system failures, to fight without data link support, and to exploit every small opening with aggressive precision. In the West, where reliance on networked combat systems is the norm, such conditions are often considered worst-case scenarios. For these Asian pilots, they are simply part of the playbook. This shift in perspective is forcing Western strategists to confront a difficult question. Are they training pilots to fight the war they imagine, or the one they might actually face? The increasing realization is that adaptability, flexibility, and the willingness to rewrite the rules mid-battle may prove just as important as any billion-dollar investment in stealth coatings or next-generation missiles. Western military planners have long relied on data from their own combat experience and carefully controlled training exercises to shape aerial doctrines. These scenarios are often structured to test specific tactics, technologies, or formations within predictable frameworks, allowing analysts to draw clean conclusions. But in recent years, an increasing amount of attention has been devoted to studying both simulated and real encounters involving Asian air forces, and the findings have been disruptive to traditional thinking. In large-scale multinational exercises, Western pilots have sometimes been caught off guard by maneuvers that defy conventional expectations: steep, sudden altitude, changes that exploit blind spots in radar coverage, aggressive use of afterburners to disrupt missile lock sequences, and rapid shifts between offensive and defensive postures that compress an opponent's reaction window to mere seconds. These tactics have also been witnessed in real-world incidents where Asian fighter pilots have pushed the boundaries of engagement rules using unorthodox intercept patterns or calculated near-miss maneuvers to unsettle adversaries without triggering outright conflict. The important takeaway for analysts has been that such tactics are not reckless improvisations, but rather deliberate, rehearsed strategies designed to exploit both human and technological limitations. In simulated dogfights during joint training exercises, less advanced jets have managed to force engagements into zones where their disadvantages are minimized, such as close-range turning battles, where stealth and beyond visual range missile dominance are less relevant. By manipulating the geometry of the engagement, using terrain masking, sudden vertical maneuvers, or by baiting an opponent into a low-speed turning contest, these pilots have turned apparent weaknesses into leverage points. Real encounters in contested airspace have reinforced these lessons, with Asian pilots demonstrating a willingness to push engagement envelopes, operate at extreme altitudes or low-level profiles that strain tracking systems, and coordinate with other aircraft in ways that mimic swarm tactics. This blending of live operational daring with the structured lessons from simulations has produced a style of aerial warfare that feels fluid and adaptive rather than mechanical. Western doctrine, by contrast, has tended to prize efficiency, predictability, and procedural discipline, which works well in a symmetric fight against a similarly trained force, but can be destabilized by opponents who refuse to play by the same rules. Analysts reviewing footage, telemetry, and pilot debriefs from these encounters have begun to note a pattern. Western pilots often enter these engagements with superior technology, but are forced into reactive positions when faced with unconventional maneuvers, leading to situations where their aircraft's full capabilities are never brought to bear. This has sparked debates within military think tanks about whether existing training programs prepare pilots for the mental and physical demands of fighting an opponent who embraces unpredictability as a strategic asset. What has become increasingly clear is that the fusion of insights from both simulated combat and actual encounters has allowed these Asian air forces to refine a style of aerial engagement that is less about matching an opponent system for system and more about reshaping the terms of the fight itself, a shift that Western air combat philosophy is now being compelled to study with far greater seriousness than ever before. One of the most striking developments observed in the evolution of Asian aerial warfare is the seamless integration of drones with manned fighter aircraft, a strategy that is beginning to alter the fundamentals of air combat. Traditionally, drones in Western doctrine have been used primarily for surveillance, reconnaissance, or precision strikes in low-threat environments, operating separately from manned fighter operations. In contrast, several Asian air forces have been experimenting with and deploying tactics where drones operate alongside piloted jets in real time, functioning not as independent tools but as active participants in the aerial battle network. These drones can be used to extend radar coverage, act as decoys to draw enemy missiles, or perform aggressive probing maneuvers that reveal an opponent's firing patterns and defensive reflexes. In certain exercises, drones have been seen flying in close coordination with fighters, mirroring their movements to confuse radar tracking systems or breaking off suddenly to simulate multiple inbound threats, forcing the defending side to expend valuable missiles on unmanned targets. Some drones are armed and capable of carrying out direct strikes in coordination with manned aircraft, creating layered attack waves that can overwhelm defenses. This combination creates an engagement scenario that is far less predictable than traditional air combat as the opponent must now track and respond to a swarm of entities with different speed profiles, radar signatures, and threat potentials. The psychological pressure this places on defending pilots is considerable. Every radar contact could be a decoy, a reconnaissance drone, or a lethal strike platform, and misjudging any of them can mean losing control of the engagement. Beyond the tactical confusion, the integration of drones allows manned fighters to operate more aggressively. Pilots can push deeper into contested airspace, knowing that drones are scouting ahead, jamming enemy systems, or even sacrificing themselves to clear a path. This significantly shifts the risk calculus, as the manned aircraft are no longer the first line of contact in dangerous situations. The use of drones in this cooperative role also reduces the need for perfect stealth, as their presence can mask the approach or retreat of fighters, disrupting an enemy's situational awareness. What makes this integration even more challenging for Western doctrines is that it relies less on singular technological superiority and more on fluid coordination between multiple platforms, something that Asian forces have been practicing extensively. This means even if the drones themselves are not as advanced as Western counterparts, their value is multiplied by the way they are used in conjunction with manned aircraft, turning them into force multipliers rather than mere tools. The result is a style of air combat that is not simply about dogfighting or missile exchanges, but about creating a constantly shifting, multi-layered battle space where the lines between surveillance, attack, and deception blur, forcing adversaries to rethink how they approach every engagement. A notable shift in modern air warfare emerging from the study of Asian military aviation is the deliberate embrace of cost-effective strategies that challenge the long-standing Western reliance on highly expensive, technologically saturated platforms. For decades, Western air combat philosophy has been built around the assumption that dominance in the skies comes from possessing a small fleet of cutting-edge aircraft, stealth fighters with unmatched avionics, advanced sensors, and costly precision weapons. While these machines are extraordinary in capability, their enormous cost means they are few in number, making their loss in combat strategically and politically significant. Asian air forces, in contrast, have been refining a model that blends moderately advanced but more affordable aircraft with tactical innovation, creating a larger, more expendable, and highly adaptable aerial force. This approach allows them to deploy greater numbers in the air at once, saturating an opponent's defensive systems and forcing engagements on terms that dilute the advantage of superior technology. In real and simulated encounters, this has been evident when squadrons of less expensive fighters execute coordinated maneuvers to isolate and overwhelm a smaller formation of advanced jets, exploiting the fact that even the most capable aircraft can only engage so many targets at once. These cost-effective platforms are not simply cheaper copies of Western designs. They are often tailored for agility, speed, and specific mission profiles, with pilots trained to exploit their strengths rather than try to match the opponent in areas where the disparity is too great. These air forces tend to invest heavily in pilot training and maintenance cycles, ensuring that their aircraft, while not the most advanced, are consistently operational and flown by crews skilled in aggressive, adaptive tactics. This strategy also frees resources for other critical areas such as integrated air defense systems, drone fleets, and electronic warfare capabilities, creating a layered defense-offense ecosystem that can absorb losses without catastrophic degradation of capability. In some cases, these affordable aircraft are paired with advanced weapons or retrofitted with upgraded avionics, blending the old with the new in ways that surprise opponents expecting a purely low-tech threat. The economic logic is equally important. While the loss of a single multi-million-dollar fifth-generation fighter might alter the course of a campaign for a Western power, the loss of a cost-effective jet in an Asian force is often factored into operational planning from the outset, allowing commanders to take risks that a more expensive fleet could never afford. This willingness to operate with a higher tolerance for attrition can change the entire tempo of a battle, pushing opponents into a reactive stance. For Western analysts, this poses an uncomfortable realization. The future of air combat may not be determined solely by who has the most sophisticated aircraft, but by who can sustain the fight longer, field more platforms simultaneously, and adapt their strategies to stretch the opponent's resources to breaking point. One of the most intriguing aspects of Asian aerial strategy that has caught the attention of Western defense analysts is the sophisticated use of psychological warfare in the skies, a dimension of air combat that extends far beyond the mechanical exchange of missiles and maneuvers. While traditional Western doctrines have emphasized dominance through superior technology, sensor fusion, and battlefield awareness, some Asian air forces have woven deliberate psychological disruption into their engagement patterns, turning the mental state of the opposing pilot into a battlefield of its own. This involves techniques designed not only to physically outmaneuver an enemy, but to unsettle their confidence, disrupt their decision-making rhythm, and create doubt at critical moments. Among these tactics are deceptive radar signatures, where aircraft deliberately manipulate their electronic emissions to appear as something they are not, either masking their presence or exaggerating their threat profile, forcing opponents to misallocate resources or second-guess their intercept plans. Feints are also used with remarkable effectiveness, where fighters simulate attack runs only to pull away at the last moment, conditioning the enemy into a cycle of false alarms that dulls their readiness for the real strike. Unexpected maneuvering plays a central role as well, with pilots breaking from predictable flight paths to exploit the natural human tendency to anticipate based on pattern recognition. By refusing to adhere to anticipated engagement profiles, these pilots can push opponents into reactive decision-making, where each move is a defensive response rather than a calculated offensive action. Low-level high-speed passes, sudden dives into radar shadow zones, or unorthodox vertical climbs can be used not only to evade tracking, but to provoke overcorrection from the enemy, creating openings for a decisive strike. The psychological dimension extends to multi-aircraft coordination as well. Pairs or formations may deliberately stagger their approach times or switch roles mid-engagement, creating the impression of a larger force than is actually present. Even communication discipline plays a role, with some units employing radio silence at key moments to make opponents feel isolated or uncertain about their situational picture. The cumulative effect of these tactics is to wear down the mental stamina of enemy pilots, inducing hesitation at the moment decisive action is required. This is especially potent when combined with long-duration sorties that force the opponent to remain at peak alertness for extended periods, leading to fatigue and slower reaction times. In a high-speed, high-stakes environment where decisions are made in fractions of a second, even a brief lapse in concentration can mean the difference between survival and defeat. Western analysts studying these methods are beginning to recognize that while hardware and training are vital, they must also prepare pilots for the mental chess match that modern aerial combat increasingly resembles. The challenge lies in the fact that such psychological tactics are not easily countered by new technology. They require a recalibration of mindset, training pilots to remain composed under deliberate provocation, and to maintain clarity even when the battle feels unpredictable and chaotic. In the skies above, victory will no longer belong to the side with the shiniest hardware, but to the one that can think faster, adapt sooner, and fight smarter. The West is learning that in this new era of air combat, the battle is not just about who can hit hardest. It's about who can change the game before the other side even realizes the rules have shifted.